good morning. You're watching News9. I'm Swetha Kothari. We're bringing you stories from the world of business, policy and economy. Beginning this show as usual with markets. And the markets have opened up in green. Sitting to my left is Kartik Malhotra. Also joining us is Mohit Gang, who's the co-founder and CEO of Moneyfront. Let's quickly go to Kartik first before I go to Mohit. Markets opening on a positive note. It's been positive since the last 12 hours, for that matter, for the country.
That's
in total.
right. Over the moon, I think it's not just the Chandrayaan, it's not just India, but also Indian markets. So markets have opened well in the green this morning. Swetha, good morning to you. Hi, Mohit. Good morning. We've seen almost a half a percentage point up in the broader markets, Sensex and Nifty both. Look at the small cap, mid cap, that rally continues unabated. So small caps up about 1% in early trade this morning, mid caps also up about 0.9% or so. Overall, nothing to complain as far as the markets go. Even look at the international indices. It's not just the Indian markets. We've had a bullish sentiment even on the Nasdaq Composite, up about 1.5% this morning. This morning for us, of course, this is when markets closed in the US late last night for us. Hang Seng, Kospi and the Shanghai Composite all in the green this morning. Surprisingly for the Shanghai Composite, despite the fact that there has been a blue chip sell-off in China. But markets not taking cues of any sort of negativity, even when it comes to the US. Jerome Powell's lecture at Jackson Hole is likely to happen today. There is going to be some sort of a discussion on increasing rates, further tightening the monetary policy. But markets seem a little unperturbed at the moment.
Okay, I would like to believe and love to think that it's because of what happened in India yesterday. India landed on the moon for the first time, but I'm sure that's not it. Mohit, what's happening here?
Hi, morning Shweta and Kartik. I think, we're all over the moon now. And so obviously, I think the feeling and the excitement is absolutely stunning. Look, I think globally, the US PMI data has come in quite weak. Honestly, in August, the reading has come at around 47 as against last month's reading of 49, which is a dramatic fall in the PMI reading. And markets, I think, is reading into it a bit too much to my mind. Markets thinking that a bad news perhaps is good, that the policy or whatever the policy makers might take into cognizance that the market is or the economy is not so strong as they believe it is, and might do something with the rates or might signal a rate pause or something like that. However, I think what happens at Jackson Hole Symposium today will be worth watching, and the words of Powell will be closely monitored to my mind. I think this is more of a short-lived enthusiasm in the US market per se, but I continue to believe that the Indian undercurrent is fairly strong, and I've been repeating that on your show for quite some while, that I personally believe that the undercurrent in the Indian market is absolutely robust, honestly, though you can argue and you can complain that the valuations are very steep right now and good quality pockets are extremely rich, and it's very difficult to get hold of good companies at a reasonable valuation today. But finally, I think you're paying a price for being a unique market globally right now, and that's where India stands, not just on the moon, but otherwise also. I think it's a story to be believed.
Right. Mohit, good morning. Wonderful having you back with us early this morning. And of course, it's a historic day. It's the morning after India's landing on the moon. And of course, I think the signal that goes to the world is that India is no longer, an underdog. India is pretty much a front runner when it comes to not just the economy, and we have been among the fastest growing economies, but also outside of our remit of the world as we know it. And space is also a sector that we are easily able to conquer. But coming back to Indian markets, Mohit, there seems to be a greater sort of, push when it comes to small caps and mid caps right now in the market. The momentum there seems much higher than what we see otherwise in the large caps. Why is that so?
Look, Karthik, as I said, I think good quality companies are extremely difficult to find at the right valuations. But in some pockets of mid and small cap, you can still, if you like really dig deep, you can still find good quality companies which are growing in higher double digits or something like that. And that's where I think market is trying to figure out value zones. And you're also seeing increased amount of institutional participation in these segments, increased amount of mutual fund buying in this segment. That also is perhaps because a lot of retail investors investors are entering the small cap and mid cap funds right now. But I think the overall DII participation in the mid and small cap sector has gone up tremendously, and that's more to do. My sense is the two reasons. One, obviously, the large cap valuations look extremely rich or almost fairly valued to the brim, and second is I think people are still finding good opportunities in the mid and small cap segment.
Okay. And is there any correction that one should expect? Because we have been speaking to other market experts as well, and some are of the opinion that that right now what we are seeing is perhaps an overzealous bullish sentiment, and there could be some correction underway perhaps in the coming quarter, if not this quarter itself. And of course, inflation and growth numbers which are going to come out next week could give us some indication towards that. But you're mentioning that markets are valued correctly right now, and this undercurrent is being felt fairly strongly. But any correction, and if that correction were to happen, what is the kind of downside that we could possibly look at this year?
Kartik, look, I think you can never do away with corrections, and that's a part of any equity cycle. Honestly, for last 40 years of market history, if you see, there's only been 2 years when markets have not seen a correction beyond 10%, right? So every year you will see a correction which is greater than 10%, and which is part and parcel of the market cycles. However, do we foresee a very steep correction? Honestly, to my mind, that doesn't look very likely. Given the rich valuations, you can time correct for sure. You can time correct maybe next 6 months odd and be in a range bound kind of a market. Nifty could hover between the range of around 18 to 19,000 at a slightly largish range I'm quoting out here. But I think, 19 to 20,000 kind of a range, basically, right? So I think that's more like it right now, unless there is an event risk which unfolds, unless the inflation reading goes beyond controllable limits, right? The food inflation, and I was reading RBI governor's statement yesterday, who said that the food inflation should ease off by September. If that happens, then I think we are well in control and well in grip. India is also entering an election year, right? A massive election year, three state elections, three big state elections, and then the general elections next year. Election years are typically good massive consumption years. There's a lot of consumption boost on the ground, a lot of money which comes into the country, a lot of money which gets spent in the rural areas by free doles and other and those other booties which are being doled out to the public at large, right?
Ravery,
So a
as
lot
it
of
is popularly referred to today. Right.
Yeah. So I think those things should help at a ground level. However, inflation is something which we all need to keep a watch on, and then consequently the central bank policy action.
Right, of course. So we'll come to the macros separately. In fact, we have a lot to discuss on that front also. But let's look at the stocks in action this morning, Swetha. And interesting news coming in by way of investments in Reliance Retail. So Reliance Retail, of course, is now a 1% stake, 0.9% stake on Reliance Retail is now being taken up by QIA, Qatar Investment Authority. And that has led to an increase in the Reliance stock this morning. So what is happening really on the Reliance Retail front, Mohit, if you can just take us through, of course, in the context of the news coming on Reliance Retail, QIA's investments coming into Reliance Retail. This morning, of course, the stock is up in the green, and Reliance, of course, ever since the demerger and even earlier than that, has mostly been a buy call for most brokerages. What is really happening at Reliance Retail? What is the love that investors of all global hues, for that matter, are seeing in the retail arm of Reliance? Of course, Jio was a very different story altogether, but retail is also something which is seeing enough and more traction from global players.
Yeah, totally. I think, look, Karthik, honestly, it's an unfortunate thing that we can't buy Reliance Retail as a standalone business, and there's very limited public.
Do you think a
There's very
demerger of
limited.
Reliance Retail is also on the cards, Mohit, since you mentioned that?
Honestly, I think it looks like pretty soon, because 5 years before, I think the Reliance guys at their annual general meeting announced that they will try and demerge these businesses separately, and perhaps the time is absolutely ripe now. And you have a Reliance AGM coming on 28th, though I doubt that this announcement will be made in this AGM. But yeah, pretty soon we should see some announcements coming towards this thing. Reliance retail, honestly, from a foreign perspective or from a foreign investor perspective, is a secular play on the Indian economy. To be very honest, it's as large as it gets. Right, you have a 70,000 crore kind of a revenue which Reliance Retail booked last year, which is a massive revenue which they are clocking at $100 billion kind of a valuation. It looks an absolutely and all the marquee names. Look, honestly, if you look at the private equity investments over a period of time which Reliance Retail has drawn, they are all marquee names out there, right? And I think, yeah, you put out the list correctly out there. So I think it's a secular play on the Indian economy, and their execution capability is par excellence, which everyone knows. And if you have to play the retail story, the India story, there's nothing better to play it through, but to play it through Reliance. The unfortunate part is you cannot buy the stock standalone. You have to buy it through Reliance Industries, and by virtue of that, you also get the other businesses along with it. So I'm hoping that pretty soon we should have some news around the demerger of this business, and people and investors should be able to buy this as a standalone thing.
All right, I think moving on to another important stock that we are tracking is, by the way, of Adani Group stocks. Adani Group stocks, which were on a winning streak for the past 1 week, seems to have lost substantially, in fact, to the tune of 5 lakh crore rupees in a single day. All of them ending in the red as of yesterday, Mohit. What triggered?
And all of them in the green this morning.
And
so
all
I think
of them
a
in the green
great
this
deal
morning.
of profit booking
Absolutely.
yesterday, and all of them starting in the green today.
Kartik, look, honestly, I think your guess is as good as my guess, right? It's very difficult to point out why a particular Adani stock is moving up or down. And there's been so huge volatility across the spectrum on the Adani Group shares. It's very, very difficult to actually figure out what's happening in the company. Honestly, I don't see there is any fundamental trigger right now. I don't see any stock related news right now, unless there's something which is beyond my personal remit, or which is not there in the public domain, right? So it's extremely difficult to figure out what's happening on those stocks. But yes, I think one thing which is fairly evident is that the group is trying to restructure its businesses, trying to focus more towards the core businesses, trying to divest out of non-core businesses, and also trying to get in some foreign participation and some much needed cash and liquidity in the group, right? So
And deleveraging as well, Mohit. I think
that's all we can.
we've also seen reports of deleveraging, the promoters actually trying to repay the debt that was on their books. So, but all these, of course, have been coming in spurts. These are not, elements that are likely to erode 5 trillion rupees in a single day, and then all stocks starting again in the positive this morning. So, of course, there is news of GQG picking up stake. There is news of other investors taking, substantial bets on Adani. But no real triggers, like Mohit said this morning, for all Adani stocks to be in the green, and for all of them
To
in
be in the
equal
red.
measure to have lost so substantially
Right.
yesterday. But I think another interesting story, Mohit, in addition to Adani always, and going back to Reliance, of course, is the Geo financials. I mean, we've seen 3 days of hitting lower circuits, and this morning when I last checked markets, maybe your dashboard would be further updated, it was down about 4.8% again in early trade today. So how much of passive fund selling is the stock going to endure?
I think honestly, it's a very, very tricky situation, and there seems no end to this site right now. Look, passive funds are forced to exit out of it. They cannot be in an index. It's a cash 22. They cannot be in the stock which is not a part of the index, or which will not be a part of the index, right? And it cannot go out of the index till the stock comes out of the lower circuit, right? And every day the stock opens at lower circuit. There are today morning I was checking, there were almost like 67 lakh sellers, and there was no buyer in the market, right? So I don't know, maybe perhaps the index regulators will have to come out with some formula or something, or unless someone finds value in the stock and enters in at a huge buyer. But right now it looks extremely difficult, because all the passive funds have opened the stock with massive sell orders, right? There's almost 27,000 crore worth of holdings across the passive funds. It's not just passive, other active indices are all holding Reliance. So there is
Right.
hardly a fund in the country today which is not holding Reliance, right? And by virtue of them holding Reliance, they've also got Geo. And I doubt whether most of them want to be in this business right now, because the stock is continuously seeing downward pressure. So they would all want to exit out of it and perhaps pick it up at the right price. Right now, the whole problem is who comes and picks it up first. And until that happens, the stock is not out of the stock won't be out of the index. And till such business date, I don't know what's the real solution for it right now.
So, do you think at a retail level, Mohit, investors right now, retail investors particularly, are waiting for some sort of a clarity, maybe in the AGM of Reliance on the 28th, where one understands what business is JFS going to be in? GeoFin, is it going to be an AMC? Is it going to be an institutional lender? Is it going to be a fintech company? I think a lot of those questions continue, or all of them. I mean, yeah, given the way Reliance operates, it's quite likely it is going to be everything and a lot more. So, you know, it's difficult for a retail investor right now to make sense of what is the core business that GeoFin is going to be in, despite it already being the second largest, finance company in India after Bajaj Finance.
Look, honestly, Kartik, it's not so difficult to guess as to what line of business will they take on. They've already announced a tie-up with BlackRock globally, so they are definitely getting into the AMC business. They're also getting into the financial products distribution business, so to say. And I'm sure Reliance, with its overbearing retail reach, will definitely be there in lending and other things, right? So it's not very difficult to imagine. It's just that the business right now is on papers, right? There is no, I'm sure they are executing a strategy behind it, but there's the proof of the entire thing is yet to come out. So people also worry that unless the business takes concrete form and shape, has different verticals to it, which though we have named it out, but yes, you still want to see all of them put together on a paper and executing a particular strategy and then delivering certain numbers, right? So all of that is still yet to happen. And before that, it's very difficult, honestly, for anyone to go ahead and pick up a stock with that conviction.
But do you think the partners like BlackRock and any other institutional investors or large global partners that GeoFin would be tying up with, obviously some sort of a disclosure would have been made to them already on exactly what line of business, what strategy the group wants to execute. But that clarity on retail level is still awaited. And also, Mohit, I think if it were to get into the distribution of financial products through an AMC sort of a model, getting the SEBI license in itself is going to consume some time. So, while there could be a strategy on paper, for it to get executed, we are still looking at some sort of a time horizon of at least a year or so, isn't it?
Oh, totally. Oh, totally. Even the AMC business, for it to take off, to get necessary regulatory approvals, to file for products and to launch products finally, will take some time, right? Even though we have a supreme amount of confidence in their execution capability, but yet these are all time-consuming things, right? These are not businesses which can be built within a month or so. So yeah, you're right to that extent that people need more clarity, and perhaps maybe in this AGM we will be provided with some clarity around these businesses.
Right. Let's move on maybe to the IT sector. And Swetha, interesting because Goldman Sachs is coming out with its report. In fact, it came out with it yesterday evening, stating that there is enough and more pent-up demand in the US when it comes to this discretionary spending on IT products, which pretty much is the bread and butter of Indian IT companies. And IT companies, IT sector this morning, Nifty IT as well as the heavyweights including TCS and Infosys, all in the green this morning. So, Mohit, what do you make of the IT story? Pent-up demand likely to open up for the business books of IT industry in India?
Oh, look, I think IT has two spectrums. Honestly, I think last night the Nvidia results in US were stunning. They were mind-blowing results, right? And they are projecting that their revenues will triple from next quarter. The AI story is playing out absolutely well for them as a stock, and I think that's rubbing off on the IT sector overall in India as well. The large cap IT, almost there in terms of valuations, fairly valued today. Everyone, including Infosys, TCS, Tech Mahindra, quoting it around 18 to 21 times kind of multiple. So they are fairly out there. But I think the story is yet to emerge in the mid cap IT space, and that's where I'm extremely bullish on. Honestly, I think those mid cap IT names, Coforge,
Coforge, yeah.
KPIT Cummins, MTAR Tech, I think those are good quality companies, growing massively well, doing absolutely fantastic on the underlying businesses, and showing superb growth rates. I think those are companies to be absolutely bullish on.
Talk to us specifically about Coforge, the promoters diluting their stake. Stock up this morning. It was up almost about 2% or so when we put those numbers out. What is your perception and your call on a company like Coforge?
Massive block sale, honestly, 25-26% kind of sale is not easy to be absorbed. But I think the way this company has absorbed, and you see the stock going up today, honestly, in spite of and I'm quite surprised with that, in spite of the block happening today morning, and such a huge block, right? And a marquee private equity name getting an exit. I think it all augurs very well for the country. Right, when a private equity firm gets such a huge exit with good multiples, they are more prompted to come back to the country, invest further, figure out more names, and further deepen their roots in the country. Specifically on Coforge, I think the business has been showing tremendous amount of value. It was an IIT Tech a few years back, and since then they've changed their sorry, complete business strategy, right? And I think that's working very well for them. And I'm extremely bullish on few of these mid-cap IT names.
Okay. And I think one interesting stock that we discovered this morning, Swetha, when you were, when we were discussing if there are any and which are the big private players in the space tech
mission,
place.
space tech
I think
place, yes.
one interesting stock that we discovered was MTAR Tech. And MTAR Tech is a Pune-based company which apparently provided some critical components that went into Chandrayaan-3 and made the moon landing possible. And that stock, incidentally, when markets opened, was up about 7.88% or so. Any update you have, Mohit, on the space tech stocks per se and MTAR Tech in particular?
I was reading yesterday, Kartik and Swetha, somewhere on the Twitter, I think that the Indian Chandrayaan 3 program kind of costed around 650 odd crores. And yesterday, one single day, all the stocks which were involved went up. The market cap of those stocks went up by 50,000 crores just in
Wow.
a single day trade because of the entire thing, right? So I think that's the kind of bullishness which is surrounding these stocks. At sometimes that can get overdrawn in the market, which happened with the defense stocks, which is still continuing. And I think with some of these names, which do definitely great businesses, it's not just MTAR Tech, but you have Tata Elxsi, you have a few
You
other
have
names,
Hindustan
right?
Aeronautics, Larsen and
Yeah,
Toubro, Bharat Forge, all stocks in
absolutely.
fact at 52-week high
Oh,
yesterday.
wow.
Yeah. So I think the stocks were rallying just on that news, and I think it's a good case to be bullish. But sometimes you have to be, as an investor, be very careful about at what valuations and what levels are you entering in. One has to be perhaps cognizant that the valuations are not cheap. And I again repeat, you have to be extremely careful, and you have to have a clear line of sight on the growth potential of the business, plus their execution capability. It's not that the order books are empty. The order books are huge, and they will perhaps have order pipelines for few more years to come. But can they execute? Do they have the necessary resources and capability? Is something which everyone will have to judge across the spectrum of stocks.
And with the private sector opening up to space exploration, I think their only client is no longer going to be ISRO. They will have a much wider, more diverse range of clients, from startups to other large private space tech companies. And perhaps with the success of the Chandrayaan-3 and Vikram finally landing on the moon, there is likely to be a global order book also flowing into these key components for space tech.
Absolutely, with both the lander and the rover tightly in place, intact, giving us the feed that we want at this point. I believe the aerospace industry, the game has just begun for aerospace industry. All the existing stocks, of course, are on a high, but with more private players entering, perhaps we'll be discussing a different story, a bigger story, better story in days and months to come.